what I find myself trying to do when I'm assessing something is that I try to break it up into as many pieces as I can and then judge the individual pieces. And I think that when you do that, sometimes you're missing like what all of those joints together combined represent. Okay. So I find myself sometimes trying to pick the things apart. And so when I'm asking myself, what do I think about like the last 6 months, there's a lot of shit that I could hone in on and dissect, but as a whole, I'm happy.
That's interesting, yo, that we're opposites. You like to go in there and break the pieces apart. I immediately, on any situation, I zoom out. I want to get a big picture of that thing and everything around it. That's how I do. I zoom out. I don't zoom in.
So when you zoom out, how do you assess? What are you assessing?
I'm assessing that thing as a thing, right? And how it's positively or negatively affecting things around it. So while that thing itself could have all types of things going on inside of it, right? Boom, boom, boom. And you can pick something to say, this is bad, this is good, these 10 things are bad, blah, blah, blah. But as a whole, that thing could be good.
Yeah.
And I can't determine that unless I zoom out. Because if it's good, if I can look at this thing and see how it's affecting its environment and the things around it, and see that everything around it is positive, then it itself, now I need to go in there and see why am I looking at it or what I need to look at.
So there is a point where you switch from macro to micro.
Yes, I got to zoom out first.
I was just making sure that I was about to say, because at some point we can all look at it from a macro perspective, but there has to be a moment where you get to the micro.
I'm the opposite. He's
so
like,
you
start micro.
I start micro.
Right.
Do you ever make it to macro?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing, because some people in the micro never actually make it to the macro.
And they end up making decisions that are lopsided. That
That's the
don't
danger
really,
of it, I think.
That's the danger. And that's why I have to zoom out to look at the totality of the situation rather than picking it apart. And it's mainly because that's what I do to myself. I'm picking myself apart. And I have to zoom out on me sometimes and be like, what, yo, nigga, what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah, you stumbled over there. That don't mean your whole existence is wild. Like, you doing some good shit over here too. But I always start with the micro. Yeah. I think that's what my default is, and I have to zoom out.
How about you?
I realize that I do them both simultaneously. And depending on the perspective of the individual that I'm discussing the issue with will be what I hone in that discussion. So for instance, if something happens, I don't know what it is, I instantly see both the macro and the micro, right? And then I will always weigh I will pinpoint the micros, but always the macro is still all there. So if this is a bad situation, first off, it's very rare that I ever look at anything as super bad, right? Like I am a naturally even keeled. I always look at the positive side of everything first. So even in when I'm dissecting the situation, it has to prove to me that this is a negative situation. It always has to prove itself negative to me. Even if it's negative, right? I'm not saying I will only look for the positive. I will always recognize the positive in there. I think people, now the buzz phrase is giving grace. Like I'm always giving grace to every situation. And I don't know whether it's a good, bad, or indifferent, I'm not sure. But it's just what it is.
That's a good way to be.
Let me tell you what I'm hearing. And then correct me, because I know it's wrong, but this is just what my brain is interpreting what you're saying as. Wrong ain't bad. And I think that if you're saying that it has to prove to you that it's wrong, that I'm hearing you say that you've got to work to accept the reality of a situation if you perceive it as negative in your mind.
No. So let me preface this by saying wrong is wrong, right? So at micro or macro, wrong is wrong, right? Like it's going to be wrong, right? And so I'm not talking about from that perspective. I'm just saying across the board. Like if something is wrong, it's wrong, right? And if there's a gray area, then I'm going in gray.
So when you said prove to you that it's wrong, what did that mean?
I said negative.
Negative. My bad.
Negative and
my
wrong
bad.
are two
My bad.
different
My bad.
things,
Negative.
right? Because one is a perspective.
You're
the
right.
other
You're
one
right.
is a
You're right.
result of something.
You're right. You're right. I conflated the two. Okay.
And negative is a perspective.
But it's not wrong.
It's not wrong. It's just the way you look at something from a negative perspective.
So why does it have to prove itself negative to you if negative isn't wrong?
I preface that by saying depending on who I'm talking to. For instance,
okay.
Last night we were driving, I was listening to this book. In the book, the gentleman said, he said, I graduated from school with a near perfect GPA, which got me into Harvard Business School. Mm-hmm. Now, I've never heard anyone say a 3.8 or 3.9 is near perfect. His perspective
It's all, yeah.
His perspective on that is all great. Like I was nearly perfect. Like I was just there. You could have someone else who could look at that 3.8 or 3.9 or whatever it is. I'm giving it a number, which is dope because he didn't even actually give it a number. He just said near perfect.
It's up to the listener.
Right? It's up to the listener, right? But there's another person who could say, I had a 3.8 and I wasn't perfect. And that's where they get stuck in that negative perspective to it. So that's what I'm saying. For me, when I look at something, it has to prove itself negative to me.
Got it.
I'm always going to look at it as a near perfect
I got
GPA.
you. Okay. So when I heard you say prove in my mind, I'm thinking,
yeah,
it has to convince you.
Yeah, right is right and wrong is wrong.
I got
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.